I'm Dr. Jeff Kieliszewski, forensic psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel on forensic psychology. Being a practicing forensic psychologist for 25 years has provided me a job where it keeps me endlessly fascinated, typically on a daily basis. And I am busy. People continue to mistreat each other. It also gives me sort of endless wild stories. Stories about true crime, things that you see in media reports or on television programs or on YouTube channels. Besides the psychology of the perpetrators of crime, another thing I find fascinating is the investigative methods that law enforcement uses to catch criminals. So today, in my little segment of forensic psychologist storytelling, I am going to talk about a case that I was professionally involved in that discusses how the federal government took down a child pornography ring. Now, the story and the details I'm providing to you do not violate any confidentiality. I'm not presenting any protected or secret information. Everything that I'm going to talk about today has been presented in court in these cases, so it is available in the public realm. Well, a number of years ago, I received a referral from an attorney requesting that I do a sex offender risk assessment on his client prior to sentencing. As I recall, the defendant had pled guilty to charges of soliciting child sexually abusive material and possessing child pornography. This case was interesting from the criminal investigative perspective. Now, in this case, the defendant attempted to order DVDs of child pornography through the mail. Now, for those of you who may be younger, I'm sure you're familiar with a DVD, but that's all we had before the technology was available for streaming. So the bottom line is things were not easy to download on the internet in those days. So people would order DVDs, and even going further back, they were ordering VHS tapes of child pornography, usually through the mail. Now, a little side story. Before the laws came up or caught up with the internet technology 30 years ago, I would read these investigations where people would buy child sexually abusive material via mail order, and the investigation would read something like, Special Agent so-and-so dressed as a UPS driver collected the signature of the defendant and he readily accepted the package of child pornography. And in those cases, the people would have to sign for it, and the agent would pull out his or her weapon and arrest the person on the spot. It took a while for those laws to catch up with with internet crime. Now, in the case that I want to talk about, where I was asked to do a sex offender risk assessment, the defendant had attempted to order DVDs of child porn from a place in California. The defendant had printed off an actual catalog that had been emailed to him with description of the child pornography videos. The catalog was pretty interesting. The catalog listed several DVDs and provided descriptions of scenarios or vignettes where child sexual abuse occurred. So often these descriptions described scenes that were produced with the storyline, and a lot of these DVDs had titles, creepy titles, and descriptions that presented almost like erotic themes that are attractive to pedophiles. And what was really wild in there was apparently there were some children in these videos who were kind of well known, sort of like stars in these types of videos. I'm not kidding. And some of these kids were described in ways where they played a recurring character by name, and the child would be referenced as this was the star of a previous video. That was very wild to read that stuff. And the descriptions would talk about how the kid had grown, developed. It was almost like pedophile erotica. It was really odd and weird. It was disturbing to read, for sure. Well, anyway, so the way it worked is the catalog actually had an order form in the back where you would check off what videos you wanted to order. You'd add up the amount you owed. You'd write your name and your address on this order form, and you would mail the order form with a money orders only, made out to a business name. And the perpetrator would mail this to an address in California. It even said allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. I'm not kidding. Well, it turns out the feds had busted this child porn warehouse and production facility in California, and they arrested the people who were running this business. Now, instead of shutting the business down, they kept it open. Well, they sort of kept it open. They didn't deliver any of the DVDs that people would try to order. They did cash all the money orders. It's not like these people were going to go to the Better Business Bureau and complain they didn't get their child porn video that they tried to order through the mail. Why did they do this? Well, they did this because they were collecting names and addresses of everyone who attempted to order this child porn through the mail. They kept the operation open for about 2 years and collected about 2,000 names and addresses. Then one day, they just kind of pulled the net up, and they had a couple of thousand cases of people attempting to purchase child pornography through the mail. And with this information and these indictments, they were able to get warrants, and they would search people's home and confiscate people's computers. And do you want to guess what they found? Well, they found lots of guys with child pornography collections. I ended up probably seeing 4 or 5 guys that were caught up in this thing. So again, here's an example of federal law enforcement keeping an investigation going and even keeping an illegal business open, sort of, so that they could collect evidence on several individuals, leading to thousands of successful prosecutions rather than just prosecuting a few people. So rather than prosecuting one person, they really looked at taking down a whole network or a whole collection of people that were involved in this illegal activity. And I did an earlier video where I talked about how they do that, how they have done that in drug investigations. Now, several years later, I was thinking about this case, and I did a little research. This case, the case that I was involved in, was actually an offshoot from a larger investigation under the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force that was authorized and funded by Congress beginning in 1998. The operation involved coordination of several federal agencies to try to combat the use of this new technology, the Internet, for distribution of child pornography. This was one of the first substantial federal efforts to combat this problem, particularly since the Internet was really moving along. Now, the first widely publicized case as a result of the ICAC task force was called Operation Avalanche. This was a case out of Florida where the feds did the same exact thing as compared to the case that I was involved in. They kept a child distribution system or network operating while collecting names and evidence of numerous individuals. Then they just sort of pulled up the net again and they prosecuted, I think, probably 150 people. You can look it up. It's actually called Operation Avalanche, and there's a full Wikipedia page on it. Now, if you find this content interesting, subscribe, like, pass this link along to others. If you know of similar stories, share them in the comments section. You can also find me on other social media outlets. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X. Everything is under Dr. Jeff Kieliszewski, forensic psychologist.